After dinner, and during the first part of the evening, Kitty felt as a young man feels before battle. Her heart beat violently, and she could not concentrate her thoughts. She felt that this evening, when they two should meet for the first time, would decide her fate. She kept seeing them in her imagination, sometimes together, sometimes separately. When she thought of the past, pleasure, almost tenderness, filled her heart at the remembrance of her relations with Levin. The recollections of her childhood and of his friendship with her departed brother imparted a certain poetic charm to her relations with him. His love for her, of which she was certain, was flattering and agreeable to her, and she found it easy to think about Levin. In her thoughts about Vronsky there was something that made her uneasy, though he was a man to the highest degree polished and self-possessed. There seemed to be something false, not in him, for he was very simple and good, but in herself, while all was clear and simple in her relations with Levin. But while Vronsky seemed to offer her dazzling promises and a brilliant future, the future with Levin seemed enveloped in mist. When she went upstairs to dress for the evening, and looked into the mirror, she noticed with delight that she was looking her loveliest, and that she was in full possession of all her powers, and what was most important on this occasion, that she felt at ease and entirely self-possessed. At 7:30, as she was going into the drawing-room, the lackey announced, "Konstantin Dmitritch Levin." The princess was still in her room. The prince had not yet come down. "It has come at last," thought Kitty, and all the blood rushed to her heart. As she glanced into the mirror, she was startled to see how pale she looked. She knew now, for a certainty, that he had come early so as to find her alone and offer himself, and instantly the situation appeared to her for the first time in a new, strange light. Then only she realized that the question did not concern herself alone, nor who would make her happy, nor whom she loved, but that she should have to wound a man whom she liked, and to wound him cruelly. Why? Why was it that such a charming man loved her? Why had he fallen in love with her? But it was too late to mend matters. It was fated to be so. Merciful Heaven! Is it possible that I myself must tell him? She thought. I must tell him that I don't love him? That is not true. But what can I say? That I love another? No, that is impossible. I will run away. I will run away. She had already reached the door when she heard his step. No, it is not honorable. What have I to fear? I have done nothing wrong. Let come what will, I will tell the truth. I shall not be ill at ease with him. Ah, here he is, she said to herself as she saw his strong but timid countenance, with his brilliant eyes fixed upon her. She looked him full in the face, with an air which seemed to implore his protection, and extended her hand. "I am rather early, too early, I am afraid," said he, casting a glance about the empty room, and when he saw that his hope was fulfilled, and that nothing would prevent him from speaking, his face grew solemn. "Oh, no," said Kitty, sitting down near a table. "But it is exactly what I wanted, so that I might find you alone," he began, without sitting, and without looking at her, lest he should lose his courage. "Mamma will be here in a moment. She was very tired to-day. To-day," she spoke without knowing what her lips said, and did not take her imploring and gentle gaze from his face. Levin gazed at her. She blushed and stopped speaking. "I told you to-day that I did not know how long I should stay, that it depended on you." Kitty drooped her head lower and lower, not knowing how she should reply to the words that he was going to speak. "That it depended on you," he repeated. I meant, I came for this, that, be my wife," he murmured, not knowing what he said, but feeling that he had gone through the worst of the difficulty. He stopped and looked at her. She felt almost suffocated. She did not raise her head. She felt a sort of ecstasy. Her heart was full of happiness. Never could she have believed that the declaration of his love would make such a deep impression upon her. But this impression lasted only a moment. She remembered Vronsky. She raised her sincere and liquid eyes to Levin, and, seeing his agitated face, said hastily, This cannot be. Forgive me." How near to him, a moment since, she had been, and how necessary to his life, and now how far away and strangely she suddenly seemed to be. "It could not have been otherwise," he said, without looking at her. He bowed and was about to leave the room. At this instant the princess entered. Apprehension was pictured on her face when she saw their agitated faces, and that they had been alone. Levin bowed low, and did not speak. Kitty was silent, and did not raise her eyes. "Thank God, she has refused him," thought the mother, and her face lighted up with a smile with which she always received her Thursday guests. She sat down and began to ask Levin questions about his life in the country. He also sat down, hoping to escape unobserved when the guests began to arrive. 5 minutes later, one of Kitty's friends, who had been married the winter before, was announced, the Countess Nordstone. She was a dried-up, sallow, nervous, sickly woman with brilliant black eyes. She was fond of Kitty, and her affection, like that of every married woman for a young girl, was expressed by a keen desire to have her married in accordance with her own ideal of conjugal happiness. She wanted to marry her to Vronsky. Levin, whom she had often met at the Shtcherbatskys' the first of the winter, was always distasteful to her, and her favorite occupation, after she had met him in society, was to make sport of him. "I am enchanted," she said, "when he looks down on me from his loftiness. Either he fails to honor me with his learned conversation because I am too silly for him, or else he treats me condescendingly. I like this. Condescending to me. I am very glad that he cannot endure me." She was right, because the fact was that Levin could not endure her, and he despised her for being proud of what she regarded as a merit, her nervous temperament, her indifference and delicate scorn for all that seemed to her gross and material. The relationship between Levin and the Countess Nordstone was such as is often met with in society where two persons, friends in outward appearance, despise each other to such a degree that they cannot hold a serious conversation, or even clash with each other. The Countess Nordstone instantly addressed herself to Levin. "Ah, Konstantin Dmitrievitch, are you back again in our abominable Babylon?" said she, giving him her little yellow hand, and recalling his own words at the beginning of the winter, when he said Moscow was a Babylon. "Is Babylon converted, or have you been corrupted?" she added with a mocking smile in Kitty's direction. "I am greatly flattered, Countess, that you remember my words so well," replied Levin, who, having had time to collect his thoughts, instantly entered into the facetiously hostile tone peculiar to his relations with the Countess Nordstone. "It seems that they have made a very deep impression on you." "Ah, how so? But I always make notes. Well, how is it, Kitty? Have you been skating today?" And she began to talk with her young friend. Awkward as it was in him to take his departure now, Levin preferred to commit this breach of etiquette rather than remain through the evening and to see Kitty, who occasionally looked at him, though she avoided his eyes. He attempted to get up, but the princess, noticing that he had nothing to say, addressed him directly. "Do you intend to remain long in Moscow? You are justice of the peace in your district, are you not? And I suppose that will prevent you from making a long stay." "No, princess, I have resigned that office," he said. "I have come to stay several days." "Something has happened to him," thought the Countess Nordstone, as she saw Levin's stern and serious face, "because he does not launch out into his usual tirades. But I'll soon draw him out. Nothing amuses me more than to make him ridiculous before Kitty, and I'll do it. Konstantin Dmitrievitch," she said to him, "explain to me, please, what this means, for you know all about it. At our estate in Kaluga, all the muzhiks and their wives have drunk up everything they had, and don't pay what they owe us. You are always praising the muzhiks. What does this mean?" At this moment another lady came in, and Levin arose. "Excuse me, Countess, I know nothing at all about it, and I cannot answer your question," said he, looking at an officer who entered at the same time with the lady. "That must be Vronsky," he thought, and to confirm his surmise he glanced at Kitty. She had already had time to perceive Vronsky, and she was looking at Levin. When he saw the young girl's involuntarily brightening eyes, Levin saw that she loved that man. He saw it as clearly as if she herself had confessed it to him. But what sort of man was he? Now, whether it was wise or foolish, Levin could not help remaining. He must find out for himself what sort of man it was that she loved. There are men who, on meeting a fortunate rival, are immediately disposed to deny that there is any good in him, or see only evil in him. Others, on the contrary, endeavor to discover nothing but the merits that have won him his success, and with sore hearts to attribute to him nothing but good. Levin belonged to the latter class. It was not hard for him to discover what amiable and attractive qualities Vronsky possessed. They were apparent at a glance. He was dark, of medium stature, and well proportioned. His face was handsome, calm, and friendly. Everything about his person, from his black short-cut hair and his freshly shaven chin to his new well-fitting uniform, was simple and perfectly elegant. Vronsky allowed the lady to pass before him. Then he approached the princess and finally came to Kitty. As he drew near her, his beautiful eyes shone with deeper tenderness, and with a smile expressive of joy mixed with triumph. So it seemed to Levin. He bowed respectfully and with dignity, and offered her his small, wide hand. After greeting them all and speaking a few words, he sat down without having seen Levin, who never once took his eyes from him. "Allow me to make you acquainted," said the princess, turning to Levin. "Konstantin Dmitrievitch Levin, Count Alexey Kirillovitch Vronsky." Vronsky arose, and, with a friendly look into Levin's eyes, shook hands with him. "It seems," said he, with his frank and pleasant smile, "that I was to have had the honor of dining with you this winter, but you went off unexpectedly to the country." "Konstantin Dmitrievitch despises and shuns the city, and us, its denizens," said the Countess Nordstone. "It must be that my words impress you deeply, since you remember them so well," said Levin. And perceiving that he had already made this remark, he grew red in the face. Vronsky looked at Levin and the countess and smiled. "So, then, you always live in the country?" he asked. "I should think it would be tiresome in winter." "Not if one has enough to do. Besides, one does not get tired of himself," said Levin sharply. "I like the country," said Vronsky, noticing Levin's tone and appearing not to notice it. "But, Count, I hope you would not consent to live always in the country," said the Countess Nordstone. "I don't know. I never made a long stay, but I once felt a strange sensation," he added. "Never have I so eagerly longed for the country, the real Russian country with its bast shoes and its muzhiks, as during the winter that I spent at Nice with my mother. Nice, you know, is melancholy anyway. And Naples, Sorrento, are pleasant only for a short time. There it is that one remembers Russia most tenderly, and especially the country. They are almost as—" He spoke, now addressing Kitty, now Levin, turning his calm and friendly eyes from one to the other, and he evidently said whatever came into his head. Noticing that the Countess Nordstone wanted to say something, he stopped, without finishing his phrase, and began to listen to her attentively. The conversation did not languish a single instant, so that the old princess, who always had in reserve 2 heavy guns, in case there needed to be a change in the conversation, namely, classic and scientific education, and the general compulsory conscription, had no need to bring them out, and the Countess Nordstone did not even have a chance to rally Levin. Levin wanted to join in the general conversation, but was unable. He kept saying to himself, "Now I'll go," and still he waited as if he expected something. The conversation turned on table-tipping and spirits, and the Countess Nordstone, who was a believer in spiritism, began to relate the marvels that she had seen. "Ah, Countess, in the name of heaven, take me to see them. I never yet saw anything extraordinary, anxious as I have always been," said Vronsky, smiling. "Good, "Next Saturday," replied the countess. "But you, Konstantin Dmitrievitch, do you believe in it?" she asked of Levin. "Why do you ask me? You know perfectly well what I shall say." "Because I want to hear your opinion." "My opinion is simply this," replied Levin, "that table tipping proves that so‐called cultivated society is scarcely more advanced than the muzhiks. They believe in the evil eye, in casting lots, in sorceries, while we—" "That means that you don't believe in it?" "I cannot believe in it, countess." "But if I myself have seen these things?" "The peasant women also say that they have seen the domovoi." "Then you think that I do not tell the truth?" And she broke into an unpleasant laugh. "But no, Masha, Konstantin Dmitrievitch simply says that he cannot believe in spiritism," said Kitty, blushing for Levin, and Levin understood her, and, growing still more irritated, was about to reply. But Vronsky instantly came to the rescue, and with a gentle smile brought back the conversation, which threatened to go beyond the bounds of politeness. "Do you not admit at all the possibility of it being true?" he asked. "Why not? We willingly admit the existence of electricity, which we do not understand. Why should there not exist a new force, as yet unknown, which—" "When electricity was discovered," interrupted Levin eagerly, "only its phenomena had been seen, and it was not known what produced them, or whence they arose, and centuries passed before people dreamed of making application of it. Spiritualists, on the other hand, have begun by making tables right, and by summoning spirits to them, and it is only afterward they begin to say it is an unknown force." Vronsky listened attentively, as he always listened, and was evidently interested in Levin's words. "Yes, but the spiritualists say we do not yet know what this force is, but it is a force and acts under certain conditions. Let the scientists find out what it is. I don't see why it may not be a new force if it—" "Because," interrupted Levin again, "every time you rub resin with wool you produce a certain and invariable electrical phenomenon, whereas spiritualism brings no such invariable result, and so it cannot be a natural phenomenon." Vronsky, evidently perceiving that the conversation was growing too serious for a reception, made no reply, and, in order to make a diversion, smiled gaily, and addressing the ladies, said, "Countess, let us make an experiment now?" But Levin wanted to finish saying what was in his mind. "I think," he continued, "that the attempts made by spiritual mediums to explain their miracles by a new force is most abortive. They claim that it is a supernatural force, and yet they want to submit it to a material test." All were waiting for him to come to an end, and he felt it. "And I think that you would be a capital medium," said the Countess Nordston. "There is something so enthusiastic about you." Levin opened his mouth to speak, but he said nothing and turned red. "Come, let us give the tables a trial," said Vronsky. "With your permission, princess." And Vronsky rose and looked for a small table. Kitty was standing by a table, and her eyes met Levin's. Her whole soul pitied him, because she felt that she was the cause of his pain. Her look said, "Forgive me, if you can. I am so happy." And his look replied, "I hate the whole world, you and myself." And he took up his hat. But it was not his fate to go. The guests were just taking their places around the table, and he was on the point of starting, when the old prince entered and, after greeting the ladies, went straight to Levin. "Ah!" he cried joyfully, "what a stranger! I did not know that you were here. Very glad to see you." In speaking to Levin the prince sometimes used the familiar "tu," thou, and sometimes the formal "vous," you. He took him by the arm, and, while conversing with him, gave no notice to Vronsky, who stood waiting patiently for the prince to speak to him. Kitty felt that her father's friendliness must be hard for Levin after what had happened. She also noticed how coldly her father at last acknowledged Vronsky's bow, and how Vronsky looked at her father, with good-humored perplexity, striving in vain to make out what this icy reception meant, and she blushed. "Prince, "Let us have Konstantin Dmitrich," said the Countess Nordstone. "We want to try an experiment." "What sort of an experiment? Table tipping? Well, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, but, in my opinion, grace hoops would be a better game," said the prince, looking at Vronsky, whom he took to be the originator of this sport. "At least there's some sense in grace hoops." Vronsky, astonished, turned his steady eyes upon the old prince, and, slightly smiling, began to talk with the Countess Nordstone about the arrangements for a great ball to be given the following week. "I hope that you will be there," said he, turning to Kitty. As soon as the old prince turned from him, Levin made his escape, and the last impression which he bore away from this reception was Kitty's happy, smiling face, answering Vronsky's question in regard to the ball. After the guests had gone, Kitty told her mother of her conversation with Levin, and, in spite of all the pain that she had caused him, the thought that he had asked her to marry him flattered her. She had no doubt that she had acted properly, but it was long before she could go to sleep. One memory constantly arose in her mind. It was Levin's face as, with contracted brow, he stood listening to her father, looking at her and Vronsky with his gloomy, melancholy, kind eyes. She felt so sorry for him that she could not keep back the tears. But as she thought of him who had replaced Levin in her regards, she saw vividly his handsome, strong, and manly face, his aristocratic self-possession, his universal kindness to everyone, and she recalled his love for her, and how she loved him, and joy came back to her heart. She laid her head on the pillow and smiled with happiness. "It is too bad, too bad. But what can I do? It is not my fault," she said to herself, although an inward voice whispered the contrary. She did not know whether she ought to reproach herself for having been attracted to Levin, or for having refused him, but her happiness was not alloyed with doubts. "Lord, have mercy upon me. Lord, have mercy upon me. Lord, have mercy upon me," she repeated until she went to sleep. Meantime, downstairs, in the prince's little library, there was going on one of those scenes which frequently occurred between the parents in regard to their favorite daughter. "What? This is what?" cried the prince, waving his arms, and immediately wrapping around him his squirrel-skin khalat. "You have neither pride nor dignity. You are ruining your daughter with this low and ridiculous manner of husband-hunting." "But in the name of heaven, prince, what have I done?" said the princess, almost ready to cry. She had come as usual to say good night to her husband, feeling very happy and satisfied over her conversation with her daughter, and, though she had not ventured to breathe a word of Levin's proposal and Kitty's rejection of him, she allowed herself to hint to her husband that she thought the affair with Vronsky was settled, that it would be decided as soon as the countess should arrive. At these words the prince had fallen into a passion, and had addressed her with unpleasant reproaches. "What have you done? This is what! In the first place, you have decoyed a husband for her, and all Moscow will say so, and with justice. If you want to give receptions, give them by all means, but invite everyone, and not suitors of your own choice. Invite all these mashers," thus the prince called the young men of Moscow. "Have somebody to play, and let 'em dance, and not like tonight, inviting only suitors. It seems to me shameful, the way you've pushed. You have turned the girl's head. Levin is 1,000 times the better man, and as to this Petersburg dandy, he's one of those turned out by machinery. They are all on one pattern, and all trash. My daughter has no need of going out of her way, even for a prince of the blood." "But what have I done?" "Why this," cried the prince angrily. "I know well enough that, if I listen to you," interrupted the princess, "we shall never see our daughter married, and, in that case, we might just as well go into the country." "We'd better go." "Now wait. Have I made any advances? No, I have not. But a young man, and a very handsome young man, is in love with her, and she, it seems Yes, so it seems to you. But suppose she should be in love with him, and he have as much intention of getting married as I myself. Ugh! Haven't I eyes to see? Ah, spiritism! Ah, nice! Ha! The ball!" Here the prince, attempting to imitate his wife, made a curtsy at every word. "We shall be very proud when we have made our Kationka unhappy, and when she really takes it into her head—" "But what makes you think so?" "I don't think so, I know so. And that's why we have eyes, and you mothers haven't. I see a man who has serious intentions, Levin, and I see a fine bird, like this good-for-nothing, who is merely amusing himself." "Well, now you have taken it into your head,
You will remember what I have said, but too late, as you did with Dashenka."
very well, very well. We will not say anything more about it," said the princess, who was cut short by the remembrance of Dolly's unhappiness.
"So much the better, and good night."
The husband and wife, as they separated, kissed each other good night, making the sign of the cross, but with a consciousness that each remained unchanged in opinion. The princess had at first been firmly convinced that Kitty's fate was decided by the events of the evening, and that there could be no doubt of Vronsky's designs, but her husband's words troubled her. On her return to her room, as she thought in terror of the unknown future, she did just as Kitty had done, and prayed from the bottom of her heart, "Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy." Vronsky had never known anything of family life. His mother, in her youth, had been a very brilliant society woman, who, in her husband's lifetime, and after his death, had engaged in many love affairs that had made talk. Vronsky scarcely remembered his father, and he had been educated in the school of pages. Graduating very young, and with brilliancy as an officer, he immediately began to follow the course of wealthy military men of Petersburg. Though he occasionally went into general society, all his love affairs were with a different class. At Moscow, after the luxurious, dissipated life of Petersburg, he for the first time felt the charm of familiar intercourse with a lovely, innocent society girl, who was evidently in love with him. It never occurred to him that there might be anything wrong in his relations with Kitty. At balls he preferred to dance with her. He called on her, talked with her as people generally talk in society. All sorts of trifles, but trifles to which he involuntarily attributed a different meaning when spoken to her. Although he never said anything to her which he would not have said in the hearing of others, he was conscious that she kept growing more and more dependent on him, and, the more he felt this consciousness, the pleasanter it was to him, and his feeling toward her grew warmer and warmer. He did not know that his behavior toward Kitty had a definite name, and this way of leading on young girls without any intention of marriage is one of the most dishonorable tricks practiced among the members of the brilliant circles of society in which he moved. He simply imagined that he had discovered a new pleasure, and he enjoyed his discovery. Could he have heard the conversation between Kitty's parents that evening, could he have taken the family point of view, and realized that Kitty would be made unhappy if he did not propose to her, he would have been amazed, and would not have believed it. He would not have believed that what gave him and her such a great delight could be wrong, still less that it brought any obligation to marry. He had never considered the possibility of his getting married. Not only was family life distasteful to him, but, from his view as a bachelor, the family, and especially the husband, belonged to a strange, hostile, and, worst of all, a ridiculous world. But though Vronsky had not the slightest suspicion of the conversation of which he had been the subject, he left the Shtcherbatskys with the feeling that the mysterious bond that attached him to Kitty was closer than ever, so close, indeed, that he felt he must do something. But what he ought to do, or could do, he could not imagine. How charming, he thought, as he went to his rooms, feeling, as he always felt when he left the Shtcherbatskys, a deep impression of purity and freshness, arising partly from the fact that he had not smoked all the evening, and a new sensation of tenderness caused by her love for him. How charming that, without either of us saying anything, we understand each other so perfectly through this mute language of glances and tones, so that to-day more than ever she told me that she loves me. And how lovely, natural, and, above all, confidential she was. I feel that I myself am better, purer. I feel that I have a heart, and that there is something good in me. Those gentle, lovely eyes, when she said, well, what did she say? Nothing much, but it was pleasant for me, and pleasant for her. And he reflected how he could best finish up the evening. He passed in review the places where he might go. The club, a hand of Bezuquet, and some champagne with Ignatov? No, not there. The Château de Fleurs, to find Oblonsky, songs, and the cancan? No, it's a bore. And this is just why I like the Shtcherbatskys, because I feel better for having been there. I'll go home. He went to his room at Dussock's, ordered supper, and then, having undressed, he had scarcely touched his head to the pillow before he was sound asleep. The next morning, about 11 o'clock, Vronsky went to the station to meet his mother on the Petersburg train, and the first person he saw on the grand staircase was Oblonsky, who was expecting his sister on the same train. "Ah, your Excellency!" cried Oblonsky. "Are you expecting some one?" "My Matushka," replied Vronsky, with the smile with which people always met Oblonsky, and, after shaking hands, they mounted the staircase side by side. She was to come from Petersburg to-day. "I waited for you till 2 o'clock this morning. Where did you go after leaving the Shtcherbatskys'?" "Home," replied Vronsky. "To tell the truth, after such a pleasant evening at the Shtcherbatskys', I did not feel like going anywhere." "I know fiery horses by their brand, and young people who are in love by their eyes," said Stepan Arkadyevitch, in the same dramatic tone in which he had spoken to Levin the afternoon before. Vronsky smiled, as much as to say that he did not deny it, but he hastened to change the conversation. "And whom have you to meet?" he asked. "I? A very pretty woman," said Oblonsky. "Ah, indeed." "On ne sait quoi mal y pense. My sister Anna." "Ah, Madame Karenina!" exclaimed Vronsky. "Do you know her, then?" "It seems to me that I do, or, no, the truth is, I don't think I do," replied Vronsky, somewhat confused. The name Karenin dimly brought to his mind a tiresome and conceited person. "But Alexey Alexandrovitch, my celebrated brother-in-law, you must know him. Everyone knows him." "That is, I know him by reputation, and by sight. I know that he is talented, learned, and rather adorable. But you know that he is not in my line," said Vronsky in English. "Yes, he is a very remarkable man, somewhat conservative, but a splendid man," replied Stepan Arkadyevitch. "A splendid man." "Well, so much the better for him," said Vronsky, smiling. "Ah, here you are!" he cried, seeing his mother's old lackey standing at the door. "Come this way," he added. Vronsky, besides experiencing the pleasure that everybody felt in seeing Stepan Arkadyevitch, had felt especially drawn to him because, in a certain way, it brought him closer to Kitty. "Well, now, what do you say to giving the diva a supper Sunday?" said he with a smile, taking him by the arm. "Certainly, I will pay my share. Oh, tell me, did you meet my friend Levin last evening?" asked Stepan Arkadyevitch. "Yes, but he went away very early." "He is a glorious young fellow," said Oblonsky, "isn't he?" "I don't know why it is," replied Vronsky, "but all the Muscovites, present company excepted," he added jestingly, "have something sharp about them. They all seem to be high-strung, fiery-tempered, as if they all wanted to make you understand." "That is true enough. There is," replied Stepan Arkadyevitch, smiling pleasantly. "Is the train on time?" asked Vronsky of an employee. "It will be here directly," replied the employee. The increasing bustle in the station, the coming and going of porters, the appearance of policemen and officials, the arrival of expectant friends, all indicated the approach of the train. Through the frosty steam, workmen could be seen passing in their soft blouses and felt boots amid the network of rails. The whistle of the coming engine was heard, and the approach of something heavy. "No," continued Stepan Arkadyevitch, who was anxious to inform Vronsky of Levin's intentions in regard to Kitty. "No, you are really unjust to my friend Levin. He is a very nervous man, and then sometimes he can be disagreeable. But, on the other hand, he can be very charming. He is such an upright, genuine nature, true gold. Last evening there were special reasons," continued Stepan Arkadyevitch, with a significant smile, and entirely forgetting his genuine sympathy, which the evening before he had felt for his old friend, and now experiencing the same sympathy for Vronsky. "Yes, there was a reason why he should have been either very happy or unhappy." Vronsky stopped short, and asked point blank, "What was it? Do you mean that he proposed yesterday evening to your sister-in-law?" "Possibly," replied Stepan Arkadyevitch. "Something like that seemed probable last evening. Yes, if he went off so early and was in such bad spirits, then it is so. He has been in love with her for so long, and I am very sorry for him." "Ah, indeed. I thought that she might, however, have aspirations for a better match," said Vronsky, and, filling out his chest, he began to walk up and down again. Then he added, "However, I don't know him. Yes, this promises to be a painful situation. That is why the majority of men prefer to consort with their Claras. There, lack of success shows that you haven't money enough. But here you stand on your own merits. But here's the train." In fact, the engine was now whistling some distance away. But in a few minutes the platform shook, and the locomotive, puffing out the steam condensed by the cold air, came rolling into the station, with the lever of the central wheel slowly and rhythmically rising and falling, and the engineer well muffled and covered with frost. Next the tender came the baggage car, still more violently shaking the platform. A dog in its cage was yelping piteously. Finally appeared the passenger cars, which jolted together as the train came to a stop. The vigorous-looking conductor sprang down from the car and whistled, and behind him came the more impatient of the travelers, an officer of the guard, straight and imperious, a nimble little merchant, gaily smiling, with his gripsack, and a muzhik with his bundle over his shoulder. Vronsky, standing near Oblonsky, watched the cars and the passengers, and completely forgot his mother. What he had just heard about Kitty caused him emotion and joy. He involuntarily straightened himself, his eyes glistened, and he felt that he had won a victory. "The Countess Vronskaya is in that compartment," said the vigorous conductor, approaching him. These words awoke him from his reverie, and brought his thoughts back to his mother and their approaching meeting. In his soul he did not respect his mother, and, without ever having confessed as much to himself, he did not love her. But his education and the usages of society in which he lived did not allow him to admit that there could not be in his relations with her the slightest want of consideration. But the more he exaggerated the bare outward forms, the less he felt in his heart that he respected or loved her. Vronsky followed the conductor, and, as he was about to enter the railway carriage, he stood aside to allow a lady to pass him. With the instant intuition of a man of the world, he saw, by a single glance at this lady's exterior, that she belonged to the very best society. Begging her pardon, he was about to enter the door, but involuntarily he turned to give another look at the lady, not because she was very beautiful, not because of that elegance and that unassuming grace which were expressed in her whole person, but because the expression of her lovely face, as she passed, seemed to him so gentle and sweet. Just as he looked back at her, she also turned her head. Her brilliant gray eyes, looking almost black under the long lashes, rested on his face with a friendly, attentive look, as if she recognized him, and instantly she turned to seek some one in the throng. Quick as this glance was, Vronsky had time to perceive the dignified vivacity which played in her face and fluttered between her shining eyes and the scarcely perceptible smile parting her rosy lips. There seemed to be in her whole person such a superfluity of life that, in spite of her will, it expressed itself now in the lightening of her eyes, now in her smile. She demurely veiled the light in her eyes, but it shone against her will in her scarcely perceptible smile. Vronsky went into the carriage. His mother, a dried-up old lady with black eyes and little curls, screwed up her face as she looked at him with a slight smile on her thin lips. Getting up from her chair, and handing her bag to her maid, she extended her thin little hand to her son, and, pushing his head from her, kissed him on the brow. "You received my telegram? You are well? Thank the Lord." "Did you have a comfortable journey?" said the son, sitting down near her, and yet involuntarily listening to a woman's voice just outside the door. He knew that it was the voice of the lady whom he had met. "However, I don't agree with you," said the lady's voice. "It is the Petersburg way of looking at it, madame." "Not at all, but simply a woman's," was her reply. "Well, allow me to kiss your hand." "Good-bye, Ivan Petrovitch. Now look and see if my brother is here, and send him to me," said the lady at the very door, and re-entering the compartment. "Have you found your brother?" asked the Countess Vronskaya, addressing the lady. Vronsky now knew it was Karenin's wife. "Your brother is here," he said, rising. "Excuse me, I did not recognize you. But our acquaintance was so short," he added with a bow, "that you naturally did not remember me either." "Oh, yes, I did," she said. "I should have known you because your Matushka and I have been talking about you all the way." And at last she permitted the animation which had been striving to break forth to express itself in a smile. "But my brother has not come yet." "Go and call him, Alyosha," said the old countess. Vronsky went out on the platform and called, "Oblonsky, here!" But Karenin's wife did not wait for her brother. As soon as she saw him she ran lightly out of the carriage, went straight to him, and, with a gesture which struck Vronsky by its grace and energy, threw her left arm around his neck and kissed him affectionately. Vronsky could not keep his eyes from her face, and smiled, without knowing why. But, remembering that his mother was waiting for him, he went back into the carriage. "Very charming, isn't she?" said the countess, referring to Madame Karenina. "Her husband put her in my charge, and I was very glad. She and I talked together all the way. Well, and you? They say you are desperately in love. So much the better, my dear, so much the better." "I don't know what you allude to, maman," replied the son coldly. "Come, maman, let us go." At this moment Madame Karenina came back to take leave of the countess. "Well, countess, you have found your son, and I my brother," she said gaily, "and I have exhausted my whole fund of stories. I shouldn't have had anything more to talk about." "Ah, not so," said the countess, taking her hand. "I should not object to travel round the world with you. You are one of those agreeable women with whom either speech or silence is pleasant. As to your son, I beg of you, don't think about him. We must have separations in this world." Madame Karenina stood motionless, holding herself very erect, and her eyes smiled. "Anna Arkadyevna has a little boy about 8 years old," said the countess, in explanation to her son. "She has never been separated from him before, and it troubles her to leave him." "Yes, we have talked about our children all the time, the countess of her son, I of mine," said Madame Karenina, turning to Vronsky, and again the smile lighted up her face, the caressing smile which beamed upon him. "That must have been very tiresome to you," said he, instantly catching on the rebound the ball of coquetry which she had tossed him. But she evidently did not care to continue her conversation in the same tone, but turned to the old countess. "Thank you very much. I don't see where the time has gone. Good-bye, countess." "Farewell, my dear," replied the countess. "Let me kiss your pretty little face. I tell you frankly, as it is permitted an old lady, that I am in love with you." Hackneyed as this expression was, Madame Karenina evidently believed thoroughly in its sincerity, and was pleased with it. She blushed, bowed slightly, and bent her face down to the old countess's lips. Then straightening herself up, she gave her hand to Vronsky with a smile that seemed to belong as much to her eyes as to her lips. He pressed her little hand, and, as if it were something unusual, was delighted with the energetic firmness with which she frankly and fearlessly shook his hand. Madame Karenina went out with light and rapid step, carrying her rather plump person with remarkable elasticity. "Very charming," said the old lady again. Her son was of the same opinion, and again his eyes followed her graceful figure till she was out of sight, and a smile rested on his face. Through the window he saw her join her brother, take his arm, and engage him in lively conversation, evidently some subject with which Vronsky had no connection, and this seemed to him annoying. "Well, are you enjoying perfectly good health, maman?" he asked, turning to his mother. "Very well, indeed, splendid. Alexandra has been charming, and Marie has been very good. She is very interesting." And again she began to speak of what was especially interesting to her heart, the baptism of her grandson, for which she had come to Moscow, and the special favor shown her eldest by the Emperor. "And here's Lavrenty," said Vronsky, looking out of the window. "Now let us go, if you are ready." The old steward who had come with the countess now appeared at the door to report that everything was ready, and she arose to go. "Come, there are only a few people about now," said Vronsky. The maid took the bag and the little dog. The steward and a porter carried the other luggage. Vronsky offered his mother his arm, but, just as they stepped down from the carriage, a number of men with frightened faces ran hastily by them. The station master followed in his curiously colored furzuka, or uniform cap. Evidently something unusual had happened. The people who had left the train were coming back again. "What is it? What is it? Where? He was thrown down. He was crushed to death," were the exclamations heard among those hurrying by. Stepan Arkadyevitch with his sister on his arm had returned with the others, and were standing with frightened faces near the train to avoid the crush. The ladies went back into the carriage, and Vronsky with Stepan Arkadyevitch went with the crowd to learn the particulars of the accident. A train hand, either from drunkenness, or because he was too closely muffled against the intense cold, had not heard the noise of a train that was backing out, and had been crushed. The ladies had already learned about the accident from the steward before Vronsky and Oblonsky came back. Both of them had seen the disfigured body. Oblonsky was deeply moved. He frowned, and seemed ready to shed tears. "Oh, how terrible! Ah, Anna, if you had only seen it! Oh, how horrible!" he repeated. Vronsky said nothing. His handsome face was serious, but perfectly calm. "Oh, if you had only seen it, countess!" continued Stepan Arkadyevitch. "And his wife is there. It was terrible to see her. She threw herself on his body. They say he was the only support of a large family. How terrible!" "Could anything be done for her?" said Madame Karenina in an agitated whisper. Vronsky looked at her, and immediately left the carriage. "I will be right back, maman," he said, turning round at the door. When he came back, at the end of a few minutes, Stepan Arkadyevitch was talking with the countess about a new singer, and she was impatiently watching the door for her son. "Now let us go," said Vronsky. They all went out together, Vronsky walking ahead with his mother, Madame Karenina and her brother side by side. At the door the station master overtook them and said to Vronsky, "You have given my assistant 200 rubles. Will you kindly indicate the disposition we shall make of them?" "For his widow," said Vronsky, shrugging his shoulders. "I don't see why you should have asked me." "Did you give that?" asked Oblonsky, and pressing his sister's arm, he said, "Very kind, very kind. Glorious fellow, isn't he? My best wishes, countess." He and his sister delayed, looking for her maid. When they left the station, the Vronskys' carriage had already gone. People on all sides were talking about what had happened. "What a horrible way of dying," said a gentleman passing near them.
They say he was cut in two." "It seems to me, on the contrary," replied another, "that it was a very easy way. Death was instantaneous." "Weren't there any precautions taken?" asked a third. Madame Karenina sat down in the carriage, and Stepan Arkadyevitch noticed, with astonishment, that her lips trembled, and that she could hardly keep back the tears. "What is the matter, Anna?" he asked, when they had gone a little distance. "It is an evil omen," she answered. "What nonsense!" said Stepan Arkadyevitch. "You have come, that is the main thing. You cannot imagine how much I hope from your visit." "Have you known Vronsky long?" she asked. "Yes. You know we hope that he will marry Kitty." "Really?" said Anna gently. "Well, now let us talk about yourself," she added, shaking her head as if she wanted to drive away something that troubled and pained her physically. "Let us speak about your affairs. I received your letter, and here I am." "Yes, all my hope is in you," said Stepan Arkadyevitch. "Well, then, tell me all." And Stepan Arkadyevitch began his story. When they reached the house he helped his sister from the carriage, sighed, shook hands with her, and went to the courthouse. When Anna entered, Dolly was sitting in her little reception room, with a plump, light-haired lad, the image of his father, who was learning a lesson from a French reading book. The boy was reading aloud, and at the same time twisting and trying to pull from his jacket a button which was hanging loose. His mother had many times reproved him, but the plump little hand kept returning to the button. At last she had to take the button off and put it in her pocket. "Keep your hand still, Grisha," said she, and again took up the bedquilt on which she had been long at work, and which always came handy at trying moments. She worked nervously, jerking her fingers and counting the stitches. Though she had sent word to her husband, the day before, that his sister's arrival made no difference to her, nevertheless she was ready to receive her, and was waiting for her impatiently. Dolly was absorbed by her woes, absolutely swallowed up by them. She did not forget that her sister-in-law Anna was the wife of one of the most important personages in Petersburg, a Petersburg grande dame, and, owing to this fact, she did not carry out what she had said to her husband. In other words, she did not forget that her sister was coming. "After all, Anna is not to blame," she said to herself. "I know nothing about her that is not good, and our relations have always been good and friendly." To be sure, as far as she could recall the impressions made on her by the Karenins at Petersburg, their home did not seem to her entirely pleasant. There was something false in the whole manner of their family. "But why should I not receive her? Provided, only, that she does not take it into her head to console me," thought Dolly. "I know what these Christian exhortations, consolations, and justifications mean. I have gone over them all 1,000 times, and they amount to nothing." Dolly had spent these last days alone with her children. She did not care to speak to anyone about her sorrow, and under the load of it she could not talk about indifferent matters. She knew that some way or other she should have to open her heart to Anna, and at one moment the thought that she could open her heart delighted her, and then again she was angry because she must speak of her humiliations before his sister, and listen to her ready-made phrases of exhortation and consolation. She had been expecting every moment to see her sister-in-law appear, and had been watching the clock. But, as often happens in such cases, she became so absorbed in her thoughts that she did not hear the doorbell. Hearing light steps and the rustling of a gown, she looked up, and involuntarily her jaded face expressed, not pleasure, but surprise. She arose and threw her arms round her sister-in-law. "Why, have you come already?" she cried, kissing her. "Dolly, how glad I am to see you." "And I am glad to see you," replied Dolly, with a faint smile, and trying to read, by the expression of Anna's face, how much she knew. "She knows all," was her thought as she saw the look of compassion on her features. "Well, let us go upstairs. I will show you to your room," she went on to say, trying to postpone as long as possible the time for explanations. "Is this Grisha? Heavens, how he has grown!" said Anna, kissing him. Then, not taking her eyes from Dolly, she added with a blush, "No, please let us not go yet." She took off her handkerchief and her hat, and when it caught in the locks of her dark curly hair, She shook her head and released it. "How brilliantly happy and healthy you look," said Dolly, almost enviously. "I?" exclaimed Anna. "Ah, heavens! Tanya, is that you, the playmate of my little Seroza?" said she, speaking to a little girl who came running in. She took her by the hand and kissed her. "What a charming little girl! Charming! But you must show them all to me." She recalled not only the name, the year, and the month of each, but their characteristics and their little ailments, and Dolly could not help feeling touched. "Come, let us go and see them," said she. "But Vasya is having her nap now. It's too bad." After they had seen the children, they came back to the sitting room alone for coffee. Anna drew the tray toward her, and then she pushed it away. "Dolly," she said, "he has told me." Dolly looked at Anna coldly. She now expected some expression of hypocritical sympathy, but Anna said nothing of the kind. "Dolly, my dear," she said, "I do not intend to speak to you in defense of him, nor to console you. It is impossible. But Dushenka, dear heart, I am sorry for you with all my soul." Under her long lashes her brilliant eyes suddenly filled with tears. She drew closer, and with her energetic little hand seized the hand of her sister-in-law. Dolly did not repulse her, but her face still preserved its forlorn expression. "It is impossible to console me. After what has happened, all is over for me. All is lost." And she had hardly said these words ere her face suddenly softened a little. Anna lifted to her lips the thin, dry hand that she held, and kissed it. "But Dolly, what is to be done? What is to be done? What is the best way to act in this frightful condition of things? We must think about it." "All is over. Nothing can be done," Dolly replied. "And, what is worse than all, you must understand it, is that I cannot leave him. The children. I am chained to him, and I cannot live with him. It is torture to see him." "Dolly, Golubchik, he has told me, but I should like to hear your side of the story. Tell me all." Dolly looked at her with a questioning expression. Sympathy and the sincerest affection were depicted in Anna's face. "I should like to," she suddenly said, "but I shall tell you everything from the very beginning. You know how I was married. With the education that Maman gave me, I was not only innocent, I was stupid. I did not know anything. I know they said husbands told their wives about their past lives, but Stiva," she corrected herself, "Stepan Arkadyevitch never told me anything. You would not believe it, but, up to the present time, I supposed that I was the only woman with whom he was acquainted. Thus I lived 8 years. You see, I not only never suspected him of being unfaithful to me, but I believed such a thing to be impossible, and with such ideas, imagine how I suffered when I suddenly learned all this horror, all this dastardliness. Understand me, to believe absolutely in his honor," continued Dolly, struggling to keep back her sobs, "and suddenly to find a letter from him to his mistress, to the governess of my children. No, this is too cruel." She hastily took out her handkerchief and hid her face in it. "I might have been able to admit a moment of temptation," she continued after a moment's pause, "but this hypocrisy, this continual attempt to deceive me, and for whom? To continue to be my husband, and yet have her. It is frightful. You cannot comprehend." "Oh, yes, I comprehend. I comprehend, my dear Dolly," said Anna, squeezing her hand. "And do you imagine that he appreciates all the horror of my situation?" continued Dolly. "Certainly not. He is happy and contented." "Oh, no," interrupted Anna warmly. "He is thoroughly repentant. He is overwhelmed with remorse." "Is he capable of remorse?" demanded Dolly, scrutinizing her sister-in-law's face. "Yes, I know him. I could not look at him without feeling sorry for him. We both of us know him. He is kind, but he is proud, and now he is so humiliated. What touched me most, Anna knew well enough that this would touch Dolly also, are the 2 things that pained him. In the first place, he was ashamed for the children, and secondly, because loving you, yes, loving you more than anyone else in the world, she added vehemently, to prevent Dolly from interrupting her. "He has wounded you grievously, has almost killed me. No, no, she will never forgive me, he keeps saying all the time." Dolly looked straight beyond her sister as she listened. "Yes, I understand that his position is terrible. The guilty suffers more than the innocent, if he knows that he is the cause of all the unhappiness. But how can I forgive him? How can I be his wife again, after she has... For me to live with him henceforth would be torment all the more because I still love what I used to love in him." And the sobs prevented her from speaking. But as if on purpose, each time, after she had become a little calmer, she began again to speak of what hurt her most cruelly. "She is young, you see. She is pretty," she went on to say. "Do you realize, Anna, for whom I have sacrificed my youth, my beauty? For him and his children. I have worn myself out in his service. I have given him the best that I had. And now, of course, some one younger and fresher than I am is more pleasing to him. They have, certainly, discussed me between them, or, worse, have insulted me with their silence. Do you understand?" And again her jealousy flamed up in her eyes. "And after all this he will tell me? What? Could I believe it? No, never. It is all over. All that gave me recompense for my sufferings, for my sorrows. Would you believe it? Just now I was teaching Grisha. It used to be a pleasure to me. Now it is a torment. Why should I take the trouble? Why have I children? It is terrible because my whole soul is in revolt. Instead of love, tenderness, I am filled with nothing but hate. Yes, hate. I could kill him and... Dushenka, Dolly, I understand you, but don't torment yourself so. You are too excited, too angry, to see things in their right light." Dolly grew calmer, and for a few moments neither spoke. "What is to be done, Anna? Consider and help me. I have thought of everything, but I cannot see any way out of it." Anna herself did not see any, but her heart responded to every word, to every expression in her sister-in-law's face. "I will tell you one thing," said she at last. "I am his sister. I know his character, his peculiarity of forgetting everything." She touched her forehead. "This peculiarity of his which is so conducive to sudden temptation, but also to repentance. At the present moment he does not understand how it was possible for him to have done what he did." "Not so. He understands, and he did understand," interrupted Dolly. "But you forget me. Does that make the pain less for me?" "Wait. When he made his confession to me, I acknowledged that I did not appreciate the whole horror of your position. I saw only him and the fact that the family was broken up. I was sorry for him. But now that I have been talking with you, I, as a woman, look on it in a different light. I see your suffering, and I cannot tell you how sorry I am. But Dolly, Dushenka, while I fully appreciate your misfortune, there is one thing which I do not know. I do not know to what degree you still love him. You alone can tell whether you love him enough to forgive him. If you do, then forgive him." "No," began Dolly, but Anna interrupted her, kissing her hand again. "I know the world better than you do," she said. "I know how men such as Stiva look on these things. You say they have discussed you between them. Don't you believe it. These men can be unfaithful to their marriage vows, but their homes and their wives remain no less sacred in their eyes. Between these women and their families, they draw a line of demarcation which is never crossed. I cannot understand how it can be, but it is so." "Yes, but he has kissed her." "Wait, Dolly, Dushenka. I saw Stiva when he was in love with you. I remember the time when he used to come to me and talk about you with tears in his eyes. I know to what a poetic height he raised you, and I know that the longer he lived with you the more he admired you. We always have smiled at his habit of saying at every opportunity, 'Dolly is an extraordinary woman.' You have been, and you always will be, an object of adoration in his eyes, and this passion is not a defection of his heart. But supposing this defection should be repeated? It is impossible, as I think. Yes, but would you have forgiven him? I don't know. I can't say. Yes, I could, said Anna, after a moment's thought, apprehending the gravity of the situation and weighing it in her mental scales. I could. Yes, I could forgive him, but I should not be the same. But I should forgive him, and I should forgive him in such a way as to show that the past was forgotten, absolutely forgotten. Well, of course, interrupted Dolly, impetuously, as if she was saying what she had said many times to herself. Otherwise it would not be forgiveness. If you forgive, it must be absolutely. Well, let me show you to your room, said she, rising and throwing her arm around her sister-in-law. My dear, how glad I am that you came. My heart is already lighter, much lighter.